power. And the 3 P's of Rome are power, power. It was all about power. Everything they did was to enrich and enhance their own power. And they were pretty nice people, as history would reveal to us, right? Everybody shake your head left to right. No, not so much. Where we left off was, you remember we talked briefly about Herod, the king? What did he trace his lineage back to? Was it Jacob or was it Esau? Esau. So Herod was not legitimately of the correct lineage to be a king. And that led to problems. He was an Idumean, and he shouldn't have been. So the people rose up against Herod, and they literally revolted, including the occupation of the Roman army that was there, the cohort that was there. And so what did Herod do? He fled, and first to Masada, and then all the way back to Rome. And then he told his buddy Caesar, hey, you got to help me out over here. And what does Rome is remembered for? What's the first P? Power. If you don't do obedience like we do, and you don't pay your taxes like we tell you to do, the only 2 things you got to do, well, they were missing on the first one. They surely didn't pay the second one. So he put his legions on the road, and Pompey, General Pompey, marched the legion over to Palestine, and he put down the revolt. And it was deadly. It was bloody, and it was complete. And so Rome then put a person in charge of the government for that area. Do you remember that guy's name? Pilate. For those of you who fly airplanes, it's not spelled the same way, but that's the guy, Pontius Pilate, from about 26 before Christ to 36 after Christ. So he's the guy that's in charge. He's got the ultimate authority on the ground, if you will, in Palestine. Yeah, and that's part. This is the same guy. So when we get to the crucifixion, we're going to remember that name. The question was, wasn't there a guy by the name of Pilate was in charge when Jesus was crucified? Yes, so when we take our walk with Jesus in a couple of weeks, we're going to see how that player fits into the picture. Okay, so let's talk about kings for a minute. We've got this guy named Herod. But he died. And then the next king's name is Herod, but he dies. And then there's a Herod. What happened? Was he resurrected from the grave? No. Herod was so powerful, he was so influential with the Romans that he made a pact with them. I'm not going to live forever. So when I die, how about you have a couple of my sons come and reign in my stead? That sounds like a pretty good deal. You're going to build up Jerusalem. You're going to take care of everything over there. You're going to help Pilate rule that part of the country. You do that, and we'll do our part. And so he does. So who was sitting on the throne, if you will, when Jesus was born? Herod. And what did Herod do when he found out that the Savior, that perhaps the Messiah, was born? What did the wise men? Remember, they came to Herod and said, where's this Messiah going to be born? We've seen his star. What did the wise men tell him? Where is he going to be born? He's going to be born in Bethlehem, right? Okay, and what did Pilate say, or Herod say? You guys go find him after you paid homage to him, you've given him the gifts, come back and see me, I'll thank you and I'll put you on your way. Did they do that? No, they saw right through them. They left by a different route. So by the time that Herod finds out that, hey, the wise men aren't coming back this way, they took an Uber ride the other way in the other route. He said, all right, this is what we're going to do. Go over there and kill all the male child from 2 years and under. He's not going to miss his chance. He's going to do away with this king so that his throne isn't isn't threatened. Remember the power thing? Herod has been educated by Rome. He's their king, if you will, in the area, and he is ruthless. And so what does Mary and Joseph do? They get out of town. That's right. Let's look at Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. Who could read that? Okay.
Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet.
The wise men knew where the Messiah was going to be born. They were able to tell him right off the top of their head. We're going to get to that in a minute. Why did he say Bethlehem of Judea? Because there was two Bethlehems. Predicted centuries before where Jesus was going to be born. Not in this one over here, but the one in Judea. So that's where to go to look for him. All right. So, Marcy, now read verse 12 for me, please.
Marcy?
Darcy. Darcy.
What, 12?
Yes, just 12. And keep your finger there.
Okay. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way.
They took the Uber ride and they went the other way from the airport. They didn't go back past Herod's palace. Now read verse 16.
Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men.
Nice guy, huh? The hairy guy, remember? Hey, this may be a threat to my throne, so go over there and kill all the kids. I mean, talk about ruthless. I just don't know how a man's heart could be that dark. But it's all part of God's plan. All right. The next guy, that Herod passes away, remember? That Herod passes away while Jesus... by the way, where did Jesus flee to? Where did Mary and Joseph flee to? Egypt. Yeah. Out of reach, so to speak. Egypt is a pretty powerful place at that time. Nothing compared to Egypt's army in Jerusalem or that area. Nothing. So they flee to Egypt. Okay, that Herod passes away. Herod has a couple of sons. Herod Antipas. This is one of Herod's sons. He was educated in Rome. Remember what we said, the gifts of citizenship for Rome were, one of the perks was you're a citizen, you can use the education system in Rome, you have rights, you can't just be flogged for no reason, all the things that go with citizenship. So Herod sent Antipas to Rome, and he's educated in Rome. And at the death of his father, he receives the ruler or the oversight of 2 regions of Palestine, and one of them is Galilee, and the other region is Perea. So here's a son now that's ruling part of what his father had ruled. His father had ruled it all, but this son is only going to receive a part of it. The next guy is Herod Tetrarch. Tetrarch. Herod the Tetrarch at his father's death received the area above Perea that included Iturea, Trachonius, and Galantius. Ever read those names in the Bible? No, but remember, Jerusalem is an occupied city. Palestine is an occupied area. Remember, the Greeks came in for 300 years and they changed everything. Now here comes Rome and they changed everything, including the names. So if you go to a map and you try and find these names on a map during the time of Jesus, probably not going to find them there unless you go to the Roman records. And that's hence all of those names. You almost can guess. They serve pizza for breakfast, so it had to be, yeah. All right, here's the next guy, Archelaus. A-E-L-U-S. Herod Archelaus. This guy's something else. He was educated in Rome. He received Judea to reign over, Judea, Samaria, and Idumea. And this son used his father's palace in Jerusalem. Remember when we talked about Herod and the things that he was doing at Jerusalem to make it more powerful, more influential? Remember, he built the amphitheater, the hippodrome. He built a palace for Mark Antony. He built the temple in order to appease the people or restore the temple. His son now is going to live in his dad's palace. That name may show up again. All right. He was probably the worst of Herod's sons. And in Joseph and Mary, when they heard that Archelaus is ruling in their dad's place, what did they do? Whoop. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Jan. In fact, let's look at Matthew chapter 2, verse 22. If you've got your finger still on Darcy, can you look at verse 22? Darcy.
But when he heard that Archelaus
Close
was
enough.
reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he went to the district of Galilee.
Okay. Who's up in Galilee is the Antipas guy. This son is known for moderation. He's known for a quiet, peaceful land. He's not stirring people up. This is probably the only area where the old Mosaic law is really followed in Jesus' day. And so this guy over here, when mom and dad find out that this guy is down in Jerusalem, they go, whoop, and let's go up to Galilee instead. And they do. Okay. We're going to switch gears a little bit. That's the Kings in a flash, if you will. Judaism. We're going to take a quick look at the religious side of life in Palestine when Jesus is walking the earth. And in order to do that, we've got to take a look at some of the players here as well. First of all, I think I mentioned before, but the first 5 books of the Old Testament as we know it were known as the Torah. And if you're going to be a scribe, if you're going to be a Pharisee, in fact, if you're going to be educated in Jewish law, you're going to learn the Torah. Is that pretty close to the right pronunciation, Donato? Close enough? Okay. Yeah. So, why is that important? Think back to what we just talked about a minute ago. Herod didn't know where to find the Messiah, where the Messiah was to be born, but the wise men did. He called them all in and says, where's this Messiah going to be born? They've seen his star in the sky. They knew, because they knew the books of the Bible. They knew the prophecies. And they told him, Bethlehem of Judea, that's where he's going to be born. How did they know that? Well, as youth, they had to memorize this. Not maybe word for word, but if the rabbi asked them for a passage or he asked them for an interpretation of a passage, they've got to know this before they know how to apply it. And so the study of the Torah was very, very important. Now here's where things get a little bit sticky, if you will. The rabbis at the time thought that the Torah, the written word, catch this phrase now, must be interpreted in the context of the times. What? The oral law said, in order to interpret the law of God, you got to put it in the context of everyday life. And if everyday life changes a little bit, then you got to interpret it with the way it's changing, and the way it's changing, and the way it's changing. Anybody see a danger in that? Look at today, right? That's what you said? Yeah. When we decide that morals are based upon everyday life like today, then reach for all the gusto, I guess, or whatever the common phrase is today. What was that? Go for the gusto, reach for the gusto. Now it's do your own thing. No, that was, I'm dating myself. What do the kids say today? What do we say today, Gabe? I don't know. Yeah, if it feels good, do it. You see what I'm saying? You see how this quickly erodes into meaningless words in an old book. That's why in the area of Galilee, and Galilee only, that rural area, if you will, still practiced the old Mosaic law. As true to it as they could be. And every place else just fell into ruin, if you will. All right. In order for you to study, to become a rabbi in your own light, you sat down at the feet of one of these guys and you learned. You had to memorize, but you came and sat at the feet of a rabbi who taught you that in light of today's society, this is what that means, and this is how it should be interpreted. Now, there isn't just one rabbi. There are dozens of them. In fact, there's probably hundreds of them. So if I go sit down at the feet of Gamaliel, like Paul did, and you go sit down at the feet of Rosh Hashanah, you're probably not going to hear the same thing that I heard. And you're going to get this. It's all based on the same books of the Bible, but you're going to be interpreting it differently. There is the danger. Different rabbis literally led to different interpretations, different rules, and different applications. Jan, you said, did you hear Jan? He said, the blind leading the blind. Let me give you one more phrase and see if you can finish it. Teaching for doctrine the commandments of man. Yes. Remember the Fiddler on the Roof? Tradition, tradition. They had all those elaborate rules that they had to follow, but what about this?
Starting point that everybody looked at differently.
Yes, thank you. Well said, Wilma. And so now we're going to show you what this led to in the time of Jesus. Sex. When you think of political power or political parties or political groups or apolitical groups, put it in the terms of Jesus' day, you would have said there are different sects. Here's a sect over here, here's a sect over here, here's a sect over here, and never the twain shall meet. Pretty much so. So, first of all, let's look at one group. High priests, plural, and chief priests. This is a group of people. When someone serves in this country as a president and then their term ends, are they still a president? Yes, we still refer to him as president, and quite often those people gather together for different functions, but they're still president. President Biden, President Clinton, they're still presidents. So if they wanted to be a group of elite people called the presidents, that's where you get your members. The chief priests, these are the guys that run the temple. So, what if we decided, you know what? Let's start our own little group here. How about everybody that was a chief priest, you guys all come over here and gather up in this group. And by the way, if you were also the high priest, why don't you come gather over here too? We're going to start our own little sect, our own little group. And since these are the guys that are sitting at the top of the pyramid, we're going to come up with some little group that's going to have kind of a special meaning for it. Let me change my color here. Let's establish a ruling body. That sound like a good idea? Let's establish a ruling body. Herod just sends over there with the army, but we're going to have a religious body, and we're going to call that Sanhedrin. This is a group of about 70 to 72 members who are going to sit and they're going to hear religious matters. And they're going to sit and they're going to make decisions in regards to questions that come up. Remember when Donato did the class for us? And the people brought into the judges the things that they needed to have a decision made on? The judges? That's what these guys are going to do. Talk about power. If your group over here that you're a member of, you're going to supply about half of the people on the Sanhedrin. And if there's 72 of them, imagine you got 37 of them. That's the majority, right? That's Sadducees. Or that's sad, you see? Yeah. Okay. Thing we should know about these guys down here. How did you get to be a chief priest or a high priest? You traced your lineage back to Zadok. That was the high priest under Solomon. And so Zadok and his sons, and if you can chase your lineage back, then you can be a part of this elite group here. Darcy with a D.
I don't know if I missed something, and I apologize if I did, but what's the difference between the high priest and the chief priest?
Okay. The high priest, there's only going to be one of them at a time. That's the pinnacle of the pyramid, if you will. Do you remember when the temple worship? And who went in to the Holy of Holies once a year? The high priest, right. Who reigned over all of the other functions? The high priest. These guys down here, the chief priests, these are the leaders of the temple worship. I want you to imagine that there's about, well, we'll get to this in greater detail a little later, but there are a whole lot of Levites, and it takes a whole group of you to perform the temple worship? Who's going to do the animal sacrifices every day? Who's going to do the sacrifices for sin? Who's going to do the singing in the temple? So you've got this whole large group of people. And these are the people that are going to take charge of them, the chief priests.
Silly question, but is this how some of Catholicism got started?
I'm not a, I'm not an expert on Catholic religion. I think you can see some of the similarities, yeah. All right. We didn't get to Jan's guys just yet, but hold on, Jan, we're coming. Here's another sect. Did I spell that right? Can you read that? Pharisees. The Pharisees, you ever hear that word? Ever hear of that term? Did Jesus ever refer to the Pharisees? Yes. The Pharisees were actually a sect. They were known for their piety. In fact, many would say their extreme piety. Yes, Mike. Someone, I'm sorry? Well, in some ways, Jen, yes. You're going to live your life so perfectly. You're going to be so pious, it's going to be above reproach. No one is going to ever be able to say anything bad about you, Mike, because you lived the law perfectly. You were so pious. In fact, you were so pious that the law said, the Torah said, you can't work on the Sabbath day. But for you, a Pharisee, that's not good enough. We're going to interpret that. If you're sewing the hem of your garment on Friday, and you leave the needle in the hem of your garment, and you get up on the Sabbath day and walk anywhere, you have violated the Torah. You have done work on the Sabbath day by carrying that needle needlessly. That's how pious you are. These people were very extreme. Folks, they were very sincere. Sometimes you think when Jesus was really down on these guys, it may have been for the people that were a little left of center, if you will. But this group really tried to live the pious and extreme lives of pious.
Still do.
What's that?
They still do.
Yeah, okay, thank you. He said they still do. They believed that true worship was a study of the Torah. Not the oral law that came after it. They really believed that they needed to live the Torah on a daily basis. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, go back to the book of Leviticus, and what do you got? The law. This is exactly how you've got to live their life. And that's what they tried to do. That's what they were known for. So that sect right there kind of describes who this group of people were. Okay? Put 2 D's in that. Okay, Jan, here comes your guys. Sadducees, another religious sect, if you will. Sadducees were known for their conservatism. They stressed temple worship. Hey, don't go down the street to your own little synagogue. You come to the temple. I don't want to hear about you worshiping in your own home. You come to the temple. They were very adamant about temple worship, and they believed in their understanding of the Torah, that's the only place to worship, was at the temple. They were known for a couple of other things. One, angels. No angels. No life after death. No afterworld. It's here and it's now. That's what the Sadducees believed. I think when we were kids growing up, the way to remember that was they don't believe in life after death or angels, and that's sad, you see. Okay? Sadducees. It's actually a religious sect. They actually exercised a lot of political power by their close association with Rome. The Sadducees and Pontius Pilate were tight. They were like this. Okay? You're going to see when we get to the temple part of it how closely connected that was. But just think for a minute, or remember, if you will, these guys right here are really tight with Rome and the Roman officials. That's where they get their power. All right. Questions about your men there, Jan? None of them were farmers, probably. All right. That's sad, you see. Boy, that was a softball. All right, the next group, scribes. Scribes were known for their knowledge of the law. They came from all walks of life, and their authority rested on learning. You didn't have to be of the Zadok lineage to be a scribe. No. To get to be a scribe, what you needed to do is you needed to learn the law, and you needed to go study under a rabbi until you have mastered the law yourself. And by the way, it took about 40 years. At 40 years, if you've been spending your whole life learning and studying under a rabbi, then you can become a rabbi in your own life. But nobody under 40. That's a lot. That's kindergarten to 12th. That's associate's degree. That's a bachelor's degree. That's a master's degree. That's a doctorate degree, and keep going until you get to about 40. Knowledge and knowledge of the law was what they found their sect was founded on. Okay. That's all we need to know about it for now. Essenes. What do we know about the Essenes? Jan, you're shaking your head. Go ahead, Margaret. Yes. So much. Did you hear what Margaret said? They moved into the desert. They isolated themselves. Not a lot of women, not a lot of children, mostly males, died in the desert, if you will. They believed that the only true way to worship was to go out into the desert, go out into the nothingness where you can connect with God. And by the way, if you move back into the city, you're going to become polluted by the ways of the city. They were so secretive, if you will, or so seclusive, if you will, that we don't know a lot about them. Question, where were the Dead Sea Scrolls found? Anybody know? Qumran? Is that sound familiar? Everybody nod their head now. Qumran, Jack, that's right. They believed that Qumran was an Essene village out in the middle of nowhere. And when it was discovered, the Dead Sea Scrolls in those jars and vases, if you will, preserved, they believed that when the Essenes were being conquered, they took their scrolls, they corked them into the jars, and they hid them in caves so they would continue to exist. And they were completely wiped out. They wiped them all out. They're gone. Very few records about them. But written history, Josephus, and Pliny both mentioned the Essenes. And we know about them today because of the Dead Sea Scrolls and all the excavation that we've done out in the desert. But they were known for their seclusion. So you could call them, if you will, a sect. That's what they believed, and that's how they practiced their Judaism, if you will.
Because like you said, if we remove that completely, all these temptations, I mean, even the Bible says if one eye causes you to sin, to gouge it out.
And so they secluded themselves.
So, I mean, I get it.
Yep. Herodians. You see common ground there, if you will? Actually, a religious sect, very well connected to the Roman government because that's where they got their power from. They were all about building up the city and making it important. They were the families and the court of Herod and the sons of Herod and that religious sect known as the Herodians. Their whole idea of religion was for only one purpose. They felt if we are involved with the religion of this people, that will give us more political power. That will give us more influence, if you will. Yeah. Last group I want to touch base on. Zealots. What does it mean to be zealous? If you are zealous for a cause, what does that mean? You're passionate about it. You're very passionate about it. You're zealous about it. Believed that their function in this life was to throw off the bondage of Rome. And they formed a very tight-knit group, a sect, if you will, with their sole purpose of getting rid of Rome. And there was a smaller group within the Zealots, let's spell it right, S-I-C-A-R-I-I, the Sicarii, or literally dagger, or dagger men. They're the ones that would keep their dagger under their cloak. They would march by the Romans, and if nobody was watching, they'd stab them and keep right on walking. They're the ones that actually led to the final revolt and the downfall of Jerusalem. All right, as we end today, as you're seeing the sects that operated during Jesus' day and how they differ, then when you see Jesus teaching the masses and they think, who is this guy that speaks with authority? I didn't see him studying under Gamaliel. He's not part of the Herodians. Wait a minute, he's not one of this. Who is this guy?
He's only 30 years old.
And he's 30 years old, yeah. Not even old enough yet to be a rabbi. So we're starting to paint that picture. You're starting to look through that window, that Johari window, and making a better frame or context, if you will, for when Jesus is walking the earth. Can we end with prayer this morning, please? Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to share. Thank you for allowing us to study. Thank you for allowing us to open our minds to what it was that Jesus saw and how that it shaped his walk upon the earth. For Father, all the things that he saw that we were going astray, we knew even more, and he knew even more, that we needed a shepherd, a voice, a true voice that we could follow. Thank you for your word, Father. Thank you for the opportunity to study. We offer this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Darcy?